Hey Wolfpack, Angela Wolf here. Happy to be back in the studio and hanging out with you today. So, what is on your sewing table? Because mine is packed. Well, actually, it's really packed. So, the two jackets that I wanted to finish for Houston Quilt Fest, I did not finish. And for all of you that stopped by Houston Quilt Fest, you know why. So, pop in, say hi, everyone. Say where you're from. I'm just double checking that I've got sound because you never know about the gremlins. Yeah, looks like we're good. Okay. So my banners are acting very strange today and they're the wrong color. They're supposed to be pink. What the heck? Hey everyone. So for all of you that came to Houston Quilt Fest, it was a really great show. I'm just going to bring this down here. Hold on a sec. I know. Hold tight. Fixing something before we go any further. There. Now I've got my pink back. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Well, we'll cut that out for the replay. But anyways, welcome everyone to Behind the Scenes today. I've got an important topic. I get more questions and emails about this. Interfacing versus underlining. What is it? What's the difference? And when do you decide what to do? Well, it's a perfect opportunity while I'm sewing my silk dupioni jacket here with my beautiful embroidery to tell you where you need underlining and where you need interfacing. And maybe you don't need either. So bring your questions. I am live, and I've got both jackets pretty much cut out. I don't have the black one cut out, but it's hard to see on a live show, so we'll focus on the peach one. All right, I see you all rolling in. Yeah. Camera's working okay today, Phyllis. I think. Yesterday, I was on vacation. Yeah. So I will be sharing some more photos from Houston Quilt Fest. There were a lot of people there. You know what's funny, though? The shows seem to be a little bit smaller than in previous years. And I don't know if it's because they changed the date to earlier. And then I really want your opinion. The dates for next year, I was a little bit surprised about. I don't know if it's the only dates they could get or it was the best pricing. But next year, it's literally the weekend before Thanksgiving. So, for those of you that go to Houston Quilt Fest, I'd love to know in the chat. Will that affect your attending? Does that make it better for you? Because I'm thinking flying on Monday of Thanksgiving week is flying home that day is going, that's like the busiest travel day of the year. So I'm just curious. But anyways, that's the dates for next year. And before then, though, we will be at H&H, which is a great event as well. So, all right, everyone. Oh, Mary said you just cut a pair of jeans. That's awesome. Good morning. Good morning. All right, well, let's go over here. Hey, Terry, great to see you again. It was so fun working with you. And Terry, we did not get a photo together. We did not get our annual photo. I did sign his book without my glasses, so that's going to be momentum because Friends was spelled with like the R-I on top of each other. So, Terry, that was priceless just for you. Okay, let's head over to the table. I'll show you what I got going on, and I'll take your comments and questions. Do you know, and answer this in the chat, even if you're watching the replay. In the chat, do you know the difference between underlining and interfacing? Yes or no? And if so, what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite technique? And no, Phyllis, they're not new glasses. I've got 3 pairs of cheaters around here, and I keep grabbing the wrong one. And these are like my reading glasses, so they're really strong. So I can see you all really good today, like really good. Like I could stand back here now. Yeah. Elizabeth says not sure. Chris says not really. We did have a blast, Terry. We did have a blast. A lot of good laughs, too. You know, if for those of you that have not ever been to Houston Quilt Fest, All Brands has just an amazing team. We have a lot of fun together. And, you know, it's kind of like a family reunion. Wouldn't you say, Terry? Well, he's there all the time because he's working. But it is, I love it. And you get to hang out with everyone. It's they're long days, very long days. That's why we don't do Wolfpack meet and greets in the evening because at 6 o'clock, we're exhausted. We'll probably grab dinner and are asleep in like a half an hour. All right, Jan says she knows what it is. Deborah says no go on the Thanksgiving week. Yeah, that's going to be a tricky one. That's going to be a tricky one. Susan knows the difference. And Phyllis, you're right on track. All right, let's head over there and I'll show you what I do. And keep your comments and questions rolling in. I love to read them. All right, come on over to the desk. I'll show you what I'm working on. You saw some of this a couple weeks ago. We're making progress. We're making big progress. In Fashion Sewing Club yesterday, we did a sleeve alteration. If you're in Fashion Sewing Club, go back and you can watch the replay, how to make a pleated sleeve or a gathered sleeve. Super easy. All right, so let's take a look at this fabric. So I've already cut this up because I've been working on it for a week or so. This is that silk du peony. And look at how soft it is, like the hand. It wrinkles. It's very lightweight. If this was a collar and I tried to lift the collar up, it would be droopy, droopy, droopy. There's no stabilization. But when I have interfaced on silk du peony, which I have done it before, through time, the interfacing pulls away from the silk du peony. And I have good interfacing with very hot pressing, but it's something about it I just did not care for. So instead, this is where you would interface on your underlining. So let's start with underlining. Why do you even have underlining? So here is one of my pieces. This is just a lightweight cotton. Very lightweight. I pre-washed it so it won't shrink. That's very, very important because if you're using 100% cotton, it can shrink. And I basically went through all of my pattern pieces and cut one piece out of the fashion fabric and one piece out of the cotton. And by doing that, here's a piece that's already serged together. I treat both pieces like one. So if you missed the last week's episode where I showed how I distressed all of this fabric, I think it was on that show. If not, I'll do it again next week because that machine is not set up right now. It's basically needle felting on top of the silk du peony. See that? So the back side, you can see where the barbs went through of the needles. The front side looks like this. You give it a pressing. It's kind of a wrinkled, grungy look. I love it. So here are my pattern pieces, and I treated the cotton and the outside piece as one. Serged all the way around the edges. And the pattern that I'm testing right now is the Christie jacket. We've already sewn it in my classes quite a few times, but I always like to test it one last time for myself to make sure the pattern looks good, it sews up well. So for this piece, this is the center front. This part needs to have a little more stability. Now the cotton gives it stability, but I need a little bit more. So for the center front piece, I will also add interfacing. So underlining is the fabric you use underneath your fabric pieces that are cut exactly the same as your fabric. And you treat it like one piece. So here's two more pieces. This is exactly how this will work. I will lay out this is my side front piece. Make sure you've got right sides facing out. Now the cotton fabric looks the same on both sides, but if you have a print for some reason, you probably would not want to do that. Usually for the cotton fabric, you want to pick a color that's a little bit lighter than what you're using. So we'll lay that down. And this fabric's a little wonky because I distressed it. So I want to make sure I'm not stretching it out as I attach it to my bottom piece of fabric. And from here, you can either use clips or add a couple pins here. Make sure you don't serge over those pins, but I like to have just a few pins to hold it in place so when I'm serging the edges together, nothing happens. Like as far as the pattern isn't skewing. The top piece is not skewing from the bottom piece. All right. That looks pretty good. And you just want to make sure you have pins at each point. So that way when you turn, like you have to imagine you're serging, and when you turn around this corner, you're not stretching any of the fabric out. So that's how you treat underlining. Now, what about interfacing? Sometimes you interface to the underlining. So this project's kind of combining both of these. So for the side front piece, I don't need interfacing. I just need the pattern pieces to have underlining. So again, I'll take this piece, make sure there's no lint on there, because you have to imagine once these are sewn together, they're not coming apart again. So make sure there's no dog hair, no cat hair, no nothing in between your fabric and the cotton. And again, I'm using a lightweight cotton. So for the peach one, I've got the cream fabric. You cannot see it once I'm finished. You will not be able to see it. I'm also lining this jacket. So lining is different than underlining. So this is what we call underlining, not to be confused. And this piece does not need any interfacing. I'll bet you some of you are asking right now, what about the hem area? Well, this pattern actually calls for a facing piece. So I do not need to add interfacing to the bottom because my facing piece will have that. So these two pieces are ready to interface. Not interface, I'm sorry. They're ready to serge. So they'll end up looking just like this. So I'm going to pop over for questions, and then we're going to talk about when you add interfacing to your underlining. So these are a lot of big words for the day. Are you catching on? It's like a little tricky. No dog hair. Yeah, no dog hair, no cat hair, no squirrel hair. Hey, Barbara, great to see you. It was wonderful to see you this week in Houston. I'm watching you guys. Any other questions? Oh, Nancy, I'm so glad you're getting back to your Avenir. Perfect. That machine is awesome. Mine's going to be embroidering all afternoon because I'll show you what I did in case you missed my comments at Houston Quilt Fest. I accidentally embroidered 2 right sides for the jacket and 2 left sleeves. That's not going to cut it. So now I have to make 2 jackets. Oh, Shirley, did you? I told you it was on trend. I told you that pleated sleeve was on trend. Oh, that's a good idea. Francine, the show is a lot of fun. It's so much fun and so inspirational. And no people here. I agree. Nice to see you, Joanna. All right, come back over and let me show you a little bit more here. All right, so this piece is finished as far as we need to serge it. Now let's look at the pieces that we need to interface our underlining. So this is the center front. And I've got my interfacing and I also have my underlining here. So because I don't like the look of interfacing on silk du peony, I'm going to interface the underlining. So keep this straight. The cotton fabric that I'm using to help support my fabric, I will add the interfacing there. So I will go and do that at the iron so you can see a close-up of that. The other pieces I would do this to is my front yoke. So I have my underlining cut out, my fabric cut out, and my interfacing. Take that. And I'll show you a little tip here. This is the back yoke piece. Right now I'm kind of 50-50 on if I want the interfacing. I don't think I'm going to need it, but I might need it up through the shoulder area. And if that's the case, you can add interfacing to one area of your underlining. You don't have to interface the entire piece. Just make sure if you do that, you make it a nice curve so it's not sticking out. You can't see direct points of your interfacing, if that makes sense. I've got my collars. And for this, because the collar, I've got my upper collar and I have my under collar. I'm going to interface the under collar. And for the upper collar, leave that with just the underlining. I don't want it to be super stiff. I don't want to look like I should be on Star Trek. So let's go to the ironing board and I'll show you this along with a few more tips. And then we'll get into the embroidery. Last time, I don't think this was washed away, but this is for the black jacket. I'm still going to use it on this piece. You can see the colors. Look at how great the colors look on this. So for this jacket, I'm going to embroider the designs on a cream color so it'll blend in. I don't want the black to show through, which although you can hardly see it on here. But I embroidered on tulle, and then I'll be attaching this to the center front of the jacket. And this is one of the extra pieces I have that I can use either on the collar or on the cuff. It looks pretty good. Here's the black, just for FYI. This is where I'll be attaching this piece. Look at how the black makes that stand out so much. I love it. So this one here, I only had enough fabric for a vest, so I need to make my own facing piece for the sleeve. And the black, I have enough for sleeves, and so thus this part here. All right, let's head over to the ironing board. I'll show you some tips for interfacing the underlining. Oh, I'm watching your comments. Aren't they beautiful? I love them. Yes. Very complimentary. Hey, Sandra. You can rewatch. You're on YouTube. Don't forget, subscribe. You never miss a live show, too. I think you're already subscribed, though. Judy, great to see you. Haven't seen you for a while. And Rose, great to see you again. Francine, I think these colors are gorgeous. I'm very excited about it. I think so too, Elizabeth. I really like it on the black. It's very, very, very rich. So I know I have that. So either I'm going to have two jackets with the exact same embroidery, but you don't wear them at the same time. I think it'll be fine. All right, come on over to the ironing board. All right. So there's a couple things about this that you need to know. So here's my undercollar. As I mentioned, I want to interface my undercollar. I'm not going to interface the upper collar. I want to see if that gives enough structure. I'll test it first because I can always add the interfacing later. So there's my wrong sides. And then here's my underlining right here. And this is all cut on the bias. It just makes that undercollar fold nicely along your neckline. And here's my interfacing. So can anyone guess? There's something that I do to make it not quite as bulky. There's my interfacing. Can you guess what it is? All right, well, I'll give you a little help here. I'm going to take these two pieces. Now, my underlining is cut exactly to the dimensions of my pattern piece because look at how it gives it that nice look. If I were to cut off right before the seam allowance, there's nothing to attach it to really. So by doing this way, this is all one piece. Now, the interfacing, I want to trim down just a smidge. I don't want this to be in the seam allowances. So for this pattern, I have 1/2-inch seam allowances. I'm just going to trim. I just have to remember which sides I've trimmed. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And why am I doing this? Because now the interfacing will not be in the seam allowance. We don't need any of that. And I just swept my floor. That was really stupid. Okay, so I can see which side is which. Slide this up. I don't want to press with it on this fabric because this is very fragile fabric. I don't need to overheat it. And you need some really good heat for your interfacing. So this goes, let's see, this way or this way? No, this way. On your interfacing, be sure to check which side. This is fusible interfacing. This is stuff that I have on my website that I use for garments. You have to make sure that the side that's a little rough faces down. If not, you run the risk of melting this to your iron, and I know you don't want to do that. And I have a piece of silk organza here. You could also use cotton fabric as a press cloth. Let's do this one first. All right. I'm pressing and holding in place. You know, in the last group that we had here, we were talking about heat presses. And I used to have a real large heat press that I used to put interfacing on. And it broke. I never replaced it. But I'm thinking about getting a heat press that's large enough that I can do my collars and my cuffs and a lot of my interfacing in one quick step. Then you put it in a heat press, hit the button. Sorry, hold on one sec, guys. Hopefully I didn't like cough your ears out, but I just steam pressed in my face and that was not good. And there's our interfacing. So here's the wrong side of the fabric. Here's my underlining, and then here's my interfacing in that order. Now just give it a nice pressing. And now I will treat both of these pieces as one. And look from the right side. It gives it stability, but not too much. And I cannot see the interfacing at all. So you have underlining is the fabric that gives your fabric a little more support. Interfacing gives your fabric structure. Let's see, so this goes here and this goes here. And my undercollar is finished. So for the undercollar, I can just sew these pieces together. I really don't need the interfacing, or I don't need the serging on this. It's going to be all within a seam anyways. The only reason I serged on the other pieces, because I'm going to have lining, is that this fabric frays. But when it's cut on the bias, it doesn't fray quite as much. So this is my undercollar. So I have this for the undercollar. Then I have my, I'll put this to the side for now. This is my back facing. I can't make up my mind on the back facing. For the front facing, we'll go ahead and do that one. And with that underlining, I really don't think I'm going to need the interfacing on the facing piece and the jacket piece. I think I'm just going to need it on one. So let's go ahead and take our facing. This will be the facing piece. That's where I'll put the interfacing probably. There's the wrong side. You can see really good here how I distress that fabric. That's the right side. After you distress that fabric with needle felting, you have to give it a good pressing and it gets rid of all those little wrinkles. Here's my underlining, which is the exact same dimensions as my fabric. And then here is my interfacing. And again, you can see how this will fall into all the seam allowances. I will trim this as well because I don't need all this extra bulk in the seam allowances. So that's the process. Now let's go to the sewing machine and I'll just tack these two together. I say the two. The undercollar, I'm going to sew to the underlining. Show you how this works. All right, here we go. Any questions before I head over to the machine? Any questions about the difference between underlining and interfacing? Super easy. So underlining is the fabric, a separate fabric that you treat like a second pattern piece to give that fabric, to give the outside of your fabric stability. You don't have to have interfacing, but in certain areas like the collar and maybe the center front, I'm going to add interfacing to give it a little extra support. So we have underlining and we have interfacing. That does not include the lining I'm going to add, but at least you got these two. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. Even if you're watching the replay, I always read them. So hop on over. Let's go to the machine. So here I'm using the Brother PQ1500. You'll see a link on my YouTube channel. I always link to this machine. It's my absolute favorite machine for sewing garments. Yes, you know I use the Avenir. I've used the Luminaire, all of those. But when it comes to sewing garments quickly, this is just a sewing machine, just a straight stitch machine. So it won't do all the fancy stuff that I do on the other machines. So I'm just going to add, I have a 4.0 stitch here. Down. And I really just want to sew these two pieces together. And then we will treat them like one piece when we sew together the collar. I'm sewing just outside of that 1/2 inch seam allowance. So about, well, right there, that's a very scant. You don't want to sew right on your 1/2 inch seam allowance, so sew somewhere on the outside of that to hold these together. Being very careful not to stretch my fabric. I sew these together. There's my piece. You can see the stitch line. So you can see right here that my stitch line is just outside of the interfacing, but it includes the underlining. So that got rid of that extra bulk that interfacing would have added to that. All right, we got one more piece here. They have the PQ 1600 now too, just so you know. I still use my 1500. I love it. But if you're looking for the newest version, it's 1600, although it's still 1500 stitches per minute. And the PQ 1500 is the machine that has the needle felting attachment. It had, at least. I should say had, past tense. I don't know if it still does on the 1600 or if it's an attachment you can buy. You'll want to check that because that's how I distressed this fabric here. All right, so there is my undercollar. We'll go ahead and sew these together. Center back piece. Now I'm going to use my 1/2 inch seam allowance with a stitch length of 3.0. That's a lot of fabric right here. So I want to make sure I have a decent seam allowance. Do a little back stitch to hold this in place. All right, so now we've sewn together our back collar. Looks like this from the front side and this from the back side. So now we have this extra cotton in the seam allowance that we could trim if we want. There's no interfacing there, so we don't have to worry about that. So let's go back to the iron. And you don't have to trim it, but sometimes with the collar, I don't like a lot of bulk in the collar. So if you've ever sewn a collar, you know that, well, quite often the seam allowance is like 3/8 of an inch. I just left everything 1/2 of an inch on this pattern for now. It's easy to remember. Doesn't mean you can't trim it down. But I do not like to have corners of my collar or any of my collar to be big and bulky because that screams, I sewed this myself and I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't want your clothes to look like that. So trim it just a little bit. Let's go back to the ironing board and I'll show you. Oh, Judy has a big heat press, 15 by 15. That would be good for that. I like that. Bonnie, you do recognize that fabric. All right, come on over to the ironing board. I'll be there in a second. It's on the other side of my sewing room. I'm jogging. All right, let's move this stuff to the side. I already showed you that. So here's my collar. I'm just going to glide those scissors right along the edge and trim off the cotton. Just a little bit. And this is after I've sewn the seam. And then go to this side. And it's not even that much. It's just a little bit that you're trimming off, but it does get rid of some bulk. And now I'm pressing the back pieces together. Let's press our seam allowance open. Use your tailor's clapper to make sure that that's a nice crisp crease on that opening. And then I always flip this over. This is a little tip. Sometimes when you're pressing, if this wasn't pressed open all the way, you'll have a little wrinkle. I always go to the right side then and make sure that everything lays flat, especially on the seam right there. All right. Here's my undercollar, and it looks great. I'm just going to trim off just a little bit here. I'm trimming off these little corners at a 45-degree angle. This is your undercollar, which also will help reduce a little bit of bulk when we sew the upper collar. So there's my undercollar, and I can decide, is that enough to hold my collar in place? See how nice this wraps around. You know, I think it's fine. I don't think I'm going to need that extra on the upper collar. So where is my upper collar? It's here somewhere. Okay. There's the wrong side of my collar. And here's my cotton. And when I hold this up, this really gives it enough that I just need interfacing on one side. Doesn't matter if it's the upper collar or under, not really. The under collar, I need to have a little more support for when this opens up. So this looks like this would be on the body of the garment, and then this folds open. And it gives it a nice structure. So we need to baste together this here, and then we can sew our collar together. All right, back to the machine. Thank you, thank you. Hey, Karina. Debbie rolling in. We are live today. Yes, yes. All right. So this is the piece that just has underlining. And I just want to sew this together. Why do I do this? Well, you wouldn't have to. I could technically sew this right now to the underlining, but I really want to make sure that my upper fabric does not stretch at all, because I have this is a pretty wonky fabric after I've distressed it. And this will keep it stable, and I'll know right away if there's any problems or issues with any fabric stretching out. Again, I'm stitching just outside, I should say, or inside, whatever you want to call it, of my 1/2-inch seam allowance. And this is what will make these two pieces one. I will go through and do this to all of my pattern pieces that need the underlining without interfacing. I do that first. If it needs interfacing, you need to interface the underlining before you attach it to your pieces. You don't have to. You could always go back if you thought, oh, wait a minute, this one needs it. It's not the end of the world, but you really want to do it first. So the first step is to add interfacing to your underlining for those that need it. And then the next step is to add the underlining to every pattern piece that needs it. All right, back to the ironing board. We'll pin this in place. All right, come on over. So I saw what some of you are sewing. What's on your sewing table today? Anything exciting? Fabulous? Jackets, pants, Halloween decor. All right, let me make this a little bit lighter for you. There's a little better. Okay. You want to make sure there's no wrinkles. So this is, see how bad this collar is fraying? It's not going to matter because it's going to be sewn all in one in just a second here, but you can see why the other pieces for the body I serged. All right, now I just have to check one thing. This is the, I'm checking, I cannot remember if the curb side is, I think that's the part that goes on the jacket. I have to remember. As I test the pattern, there was like 3 things I needed to change, and I think this was one of them. Was this the part that's sewn to the body, or is that the collar? That goes to the body. That's why I'm going to turn the wording upside down so it's not confusing. All right, let me look. I'm going to look at the newest pattern that was printed because mine was the old one. All right, let's check it out. This is what I have. I printed this when I'm testing my patterns, because I want to double check that each piece is listed appropriately. So I printed it on one big long sheet, but I can see each one. So the collar. Yeah. The curved end goes along the neckline, which is what I was thinking. You never know. You never know. But the new pattern pieces are all listed. If you look closely, it shows me the collar there. I see the notch for the neckline, the shoulder notch. Those were not on my first pattern that I'm testing. All right. Oh, Victoria's working on pants. Oh, that sounds awesome. Oh my gosh. So lately, I have run into like 4 Wolfpack members, squirreling on you for a minute, that are wearing their pants that we did in Fashion Sewing Club, the jogger pants. Oh my gosh, I love those pants. They look so good on everybody. So Fashion Sewing Club, don't forget that pattern is in there still, and you can get it for free and watch the videos if you need help sewing it together. All right, let's head back over and we'll pin this together. Okay. So this part will be along the neckline of our jacket. You can use clips or pins, it doesn't matter. I just want to add a few here, and this is the part I'll be sewing along the straight edge here. This is the part that'll be sewn to the jacket, so I don't want to close that area. I do put a couple pins under here just to hold that in place. I want to make sure it doesn't start gapping. When you're sewing a big piece, it can get a little wonky sometimes. All right, so we're going to stitch here all the way around to here. Now, the other thing I want to point out, and I know you're going to know that I do this for those of you that have followed me for a while. Let me grab my blue chalk. I walked away with it. And then I sat on it, which was stupid. But I still have a couple pieces left. So here, when I'm sewing this, I'm going to be sewing up here, and I want to make sure that that corner matches the other corner. So I give myself a 45-degree angle, so when I'm sewing the 1/2 inch, I know to stop at that chalk mark. And then we'll do it on this corner here, 45-degree angle. And the 45-degree angle is to the point, not my basting stitches. It's the point of your fabric. Because it can get confusing, and when you start sewing, you'll think, oh wait, this basting stitch is way out here and this one's in a different spot. I will sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and stop at that blue line and turn and go down. So we'll start here, sew all the way around, and then go down here and leave this bottom part open. And I got a few more minutes, so I'll just sew with you on here. This has nothing to do with underlining or lining, but it does have to do with sewing a collar. Bye, Mary Jo. Enjoy your dinner. The good news is the replay is always here. Okay. So there, this is the bottom edge. There's my 1/2 inch seam allowance. Up here, I'm going to get right to that blue mark. One more stitch. Make sure your needle's all the way in the down position. Turn this. Yes, and that's 1/2 inch. Right on the blue. That's right on, spot on. That looks pretty good. So I'll take these extra pins out. Let's go back to the pressing area and see what we got. I'll give you a few more tips for pressing this collar with all this extra bulk. Hey, Karina, I'm using the Brother PQ 1500. I don't have the 1600. They're very similar. They're both 1500 stitches per minute, which sews super fast. I'm sewing slow with you guys on today. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. I love that machine. Yes. Full disclosure, I'm a Brother ambassador, but full disclosure, I actually had the PQ 1500 way before I worked with Brother, which tells you something, right? All right, so this is my point press, different than my clapper. I'm just going to line this up on the edge and press this seam allowance open. You can still get these. Joann's is closed, so check Wawak. Or, you know what, I'll put this also in my Amazon. I've been putting a lot of stuff in my Amazon influencer page too, so you might want to check that out. But I'll make sure I find this just in case you can't find it. It's called a point press. This one is really old. I think it's called the June Taylor. Is it that old? Yep. It was the old June Taylor one. All right. And why am I doing that? I'm pressing my seam allowances open. It just makes, it'll make your collar look much, much better. All right, let's do some trimming. Okay, so you have to imagine that your under collar is here and your over collar is here on these seam allowances. So it's your choice which one you want to cut down. I usually cut down the under collar because then when this is folded closed, I know that my upper collar is, well, let's see. 1, 2. Now I'm backwards. Let me just think here for a minute. Yeah, I'm going to cut down my under collar just a little bit because I want to, I'll do understitching there. If I'm going to do top stitching, then I won't, but I just trim this down just a little bit using sharp scissors, which also helps to reduce bulk. Now look, I'm cutting both pieces. This is the under collar, so it's the piece of the fabric and the cotton. Just a little bit. So now when I press this, when I turn it right side out and press it, I will have, see how it's graduated there? You don't have two big seams. You just have one half one and one large one, and they kind of meld together. Just be very careful not to cut your collar. In this case, I don't have any extra fabric, so if you want to see me cry, help me, let me cut my collar. I'll be really angry. Not angry, I'll be crying. Okay. And then here too. I can just trim this corner just a little bit. Don't get too close to that seam because then all of a sudden your point looks really bad. All right, and then here. All right, that looks pretty good. Now take your finger, fold in those corners. And this is where you really want to make sure you have a nice point for your collar. You don't want it to be like angled point. You want it to be a nice point. Make sense? You don't want a collar that says boink. If you don't know what that means, then you've never done it. But if you've ever had a collar where that point is like boink, hey, that's the new word for the day. I always give you a new word every week. No boinky collars. See who can spell that. And you can kind of maneuver it on your own. Make sure that the fabric is folded out correctly. And if there's too much fabric in there, then cut a little bit more away. This one has just a wee bit more than I would like. Okay. So you have to imagine you've got 2 layers of silk dupioni fabric, 2 layers of cotton underlining, and 1 layer of interfacing. But the interfacing is not in the seam allowance, but I still need to make sure that this point looks good. Yeah, that looks really nice. See, a nice curve for your, or a nice point for your collar. See how nice that looks? It's not pointed out. You don't have extra fabric. It's just a nice L right there. And my collar is all finished. So now let's check this out. How much, were we okay without the interfacing on the upper collar? I think so, because the bottom collar has a lot of stability here. This would be wrapped around your neck. And when this lays open, it lays really nice. It's plenty thick. So any questions on the difference between underlining and interfacing? Again, this has nothing to do with lining. This is just what makes your fabric stable. And it's amazing what you can do to one piece of fabric. If I could even make this with a stiffer interfacing, I could make this where it stands straight out. I'm using a lightweight fusible interfacing. So we've got lightweight cotton, pre-washed, pre-dried so it doesn't shrink. Fusible interfacing, it's the 1309 on my website. It's the lighter weight. Either 1309 or 1509, either will work. There's my collar. The only other thing is once I sew this, now I'm going to add top stitching, but if I'm not going to add top stitching, you would want to do an understitching right along the under collar. And that helps to keep that seam allowance. So this is the front of the collar. Notice you cannot see the seam allowance on the side or the top. I've kind of just finger pressed it. So if this is the back side, now you can see the seam allowance right there. Make sure that that looks nice too. You never want to see those seam allowances popping to the front. All right, that is your lesson. I'll pop on over and see if you got any questions. Otherwise, this is a wrap for today. All right, what questions you got for me? Let's see what this looks like. Get my hair out of the way. Maybe. It's not going to match this top very well. Oh yeah, that's going to look good. It's going on a jacket, not on this shirt, but you can kind of see how this is really going to have a rich look. I like it. And now I'll finish testing the pattern, and hopefully I'll have it available for you before the holidays so you can sew one too. Hey, Susan wants to know, is this a dry clean garment or a hand wash? So I actually made this so I can hand wash it or wash it on delicate. So the Dupioni has already been pre-washed on cool with a very light, low heat dryer, and the cotton's been pre-washed. So everything's good to go. So you can do either, but I prefer to wash mine on a delicate cycle. Now, this is going to have some embroidery attached to it, so it's definitely going to be a very low. I might even have to put it in a little bag when I wash it to make sure it doesn't stretch out. All right, Terry, what do you got for me? What do you think of fusible tricot on silk? No fusible interfacing on silk Dupioni, period. I hate it. It looks awful. It peels away through time. So I don't know if you saw at the beginning, I was showing how, well, I don't think I showed a bad example of one. I have a bad example of one. I'll bring it on next time we're live. It was that my purple Easter, I call it the Easter egg pantsuit. Yeah, that I actually wore to a sewing show with my sister Teresa when we were young. And I put interfacing right on the silk Dupioni, and guess what? First dry cleaning, it all pulled away. It looked awful. So interface on the underlining. Looks much better. Yeah, so Terry, when I'm finished here in a sec, you'll want to watch that because it really showed how to make this really look nice on Dupioni, interfacing on the cotton. That's the underlining. Oh, Jan, me too. Me too. Well, it's nice to see you all. I hope you have a great day. It was wonderful seeing everyone over in Houston. Next week, we've got our last class of the year coming to my studio, and it's going to be very fun. Let me see. Chris got a question. Would anyone use pinking on that raveling edge? No, I would not use pinking shears on that raveling edge because it'll ravel even more. So either serge it or leave it alone. Now it's all, my collar is all sewn intact. I don't have to worry about it. So I would either serge it, which the body pieces I did serge, which I showed at the beginning. But the collar's all intact now, so it's not going to unravel. No pinking shears. Don't waste your time on it, in my humble opinion. Oh, hey, Terry. This is the Christie jacket, which will be out eventually. So, Terry, you missed the beginning. I got to show you this in case you missed this. And I know a lot of you will go back and watch this, but you got to come and see give me your opinion, because I know you have the Avenir. Come on over. Take a quick look. So this is my messy table. These are some of the new designs that I just did for the Avenir. It's this big one here. So I'm making one jacket out of this color and one jacket out of this color. So this one, I've already embroidered on the black tulle. Unfortunately, I made two left sides, so now I have to go embroider a right side. But look at how rich this is. So this is going to be the center front of the jacket. This is just an extra piece I embroidered so I could use it someplace else. But this will be all along the center front edge. And then the color, though, also looks fantastic on this fabric here. So I can't decide if I'm just going to put it on the black because the black really makes it pop, or also add it to this Dupioni because it just gives it a little extra oomph. So I wanted to share that. And then I have smaller pieces. I ran these through the 10 needle. They're made for the Avenir, but I ran them through the new 10 needle. And this would be your sleeve. Actually, it would go this way. That would be your sleeve for your cuff. That would look really good. So I'm busy in the sewing room, busy embroidering. I've got a friend coming over to help me hit the buttons on the 10 needle in a little bit. And we're going to be embroidering away for everything. Oh, good. Any other last minute questions? Oh, Karina, I better look on the Google Calendar. You know what? I didn't even think about that. I will check because yesterday was a live fashion sewing club, so I better check that. Thanks, Terry. And you have those too. If you don't, you should email me because I know you have the Avenir. This was in the last batch of designs. I know, super fun. Everyone says, I think I like it on the black. I do too. I do too. All right. Have a wonderful day. I will see you next week. There will not be a live show on Wednesday because we've got a class here, but we will try to go live with sound on Friday. If not, we're doing a fashion walk with their new outfits. They're working on blouses next week. Blouses, it could be a shirt dress, you name it. That's another pattern that I'm hoping to have out before the holidays for the rest of you. So until next time, everyone, happy sewing. Don't forget, if you're watching the replay, leave me a comment because I love going back to check them out. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. You'll never miss a live show. Tomorrow, yours truly is on Brothers Sews by themselves because everyone wanted to see how I made those embroidery on tulle. So tomorrow I'll be showing that on the 10 needle, on the Avenir, but whatever machine you have, you're going to learn. So if you want to learn how to embroider on tulle, a few more tips for you, hop into Brothers Show tomorrow at noon. Till next time, everyone, happy sewing.